Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. Remember when I said journalists like Beth Rigby and Sophie Ridge are actually highly skilled interviewers, so when they choose to do the right thing, they are top tier. Well, I wasn't wrong, because now both Sophie Ridge and Beth Rigby have now properly gone at the Reform Party for the violent criminal that they sent to Parliament. After Sophie Ridge skewered Richard Tice beautifully last week, this time it was Beth Rigby going after the head honcho himself. Now, because it's the big boss, Nigel Farage, and because they clearly talked with Richard Tice to make sure it didn't happen again, this one was a bit more slippery, so it wasn't as obvious, but when you listen to what he actually says, it's kind of worse.
James Murdock, the Reform MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock, he was jailed in 2006 for assaulting his girlfriend. You have said the vetting wasn't as it should be. How would you deal with a case like Mr. McMurdock in the future?
Let's be clear, he went to a young offenders institute, right?
For 21 days.
He was a teenager, and he did something he shouldn't have done. He was out of control.
He's trying to argue that we shouldn't take the violence against women committed by James McMurdock as seriously because he was only a teenager when he did it. But he was 19. Under UK law, that's an adult. And this is coming from the same guy who had people rioting in the streets because of the violence against women committed by a 17-year-old in Southport. So is being young a defence or is it not?
That conviction is now spent.
So because it's a spent conviction, you're saying that because enough time has passed that it no longer shows up on his criminal record, that means the public should act as if he never brutally assaulted his girlfriend?
Yes.
It is a spent conviction.
How would you deal with it in the future? That's my question.
That conviction is now spent.
You hear how she's asking that question many, many times and he's still refusing to answer.
And from that very unpromising start in life, he went on, got himself qualified.
The point is, the question
no,
is
you're not listening. You're not listening.
I am listening to you.
He went on.
All right,
he
please.
went on from.
Beth Rigby asked him a question, the same question, multiple times in her interview, and he completely ignored it, went off on a tangent talking about his own thing, and then accuses her of not listening to him. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that he wouldn't be this much of a dick with a male interviewer, but in a conversation that is essentially about the scale of the sexism in the Reform Party, he's not really helping his case.
He got qualified. He became a bond trader in the City of London.
So he went from being convicted of violent assault in 2006 to working in the banking sector in 2007, just before bankers crashed the world economy in 2008. You're really selling this guy to me. But of course, we haven't yet got to the main defence they love to use.
If in a country that believes in Christian forgiveness, he is not a good example to young tearaways, I don't know what is.
Yeah, we're not a Christian country. We haven't been for a while, so that defense just simply doesn't work. And as for tearaway, the dictionary defines tearaway as a reckless, unruly person, describing kicking a woman 4 times as she lies on the ground as just being a bit of a rascal is really telling us so much about Nigel Farage's moral standards.
And the question is how would you deal with that in the future? So if someone has a conviction for domestic violence or assault, if the conviction is spent, they can still be a councillor and member of the party.
What if we think they're good enough?
So that's a yes. She finally got it out of him. Domestic abusers and violent criminals are welcome to be MPs in the Reform Party. But he does put one condition on it.
If we think they've genuinely, decided that the past was awful.
But if the MP is currently lying about how awful the past was, saying that he just pushed her when the court documents showed he kicked her several times, then there's nothing genuine about him accepting that it was awful. So by the standards that Nigel Farage just set, James McMurdock should not be in his party, which is why Beth Rigby then goes on to this point.
Do you believe in Christian forgiveness?
Everyone believes in redemption. Everyone should have second chances.
Is he not a very good example?
Nigel, that is not the question I'm asking. What I'm saying is there is a discrepancy here between what the court documents said and what James has said.
Right.
Is that not an issue for constituents? That's the point, that there isn't transparency.
And knock on their door.
Now Farage goes off on one here, so listen to what Beth is saying, because that's an important point.
He only won by 98 votes, and there might have been people, particularly women, that might have suffered domestic abuse or violence or assault that might be uncomfortable with that.
Basically saying that if the women in that constituency had known before the election that James McMurdock was convicted of violently attacking a woman, maybe he wouldn't be an MP right now.
This is an example of a human being who's picked himself up from a terrible situation and made a big success of his life.
Picked himself up from a terrible situation. You're acting like this is something that happened to him, like he was the victim in the situation. He was the perpetrator. He was the criminal.
My point is that there is a discrepancy.
Right. Well,
he
I haven't
said
seen
I
it.
pushed
I
her
believe you.
over.
I believe you.
But
I haven't
that's
seen the
the court
discrepancy.
document.
It's a spent
Well, what did
conviction,
he tell you
end
he'd
of
done?
conversation.
Well, what did he say
Spent
he'd done
conviction,
to you?
end of conversation.
His constituents.
I tell you what, we're busy, right? We're building a new political party.
The man is screaming from the top of his lungs that he does not give a crap about the safety of women.
Whether there are discrepancies or not, I don't know. What I know is he's a fine young man who's turned out really very, very well.
But for the
He's a serving
victim,
member of Parliament.
for him to imply that she was pushed over
I
when
don't
the
know.
court document says he kicked her.
No.
See, that's a different line to what Richard Tice was saying. Tice was saying,
my understanding is different to what the Times have reported.
So what is your
but
understanding?
It actually doesn't matter.
so they're clearly going with I don't know because you can't be held to account for things you don't know, and it avoids saying I don't care. But it's kind of the same thing because you hired him. And if you're still supporting him, even though you don't know what he did, it means you don't care.
That's difficult for the victim, isn't
I'll
it?
believe anything you say.
It's not what I say, it's what the court document says.
I haven't read
It's not what I said, it's a
I
court.
don't know.
He's behaving like a child. Yeah, you're always right. You know everything. We're talking about domestic abuse here. If you're looking for evidence of the patriarchy, then a male politician in a parliament that is 60% male talking dismissively and petulantly down to a female journalist who's trying to hold him to account for one of his MPs brutally beating up a female member of the public, yeah, that seems like a good place to start. But this next bit is classic Farage.
And this
Okay,
is why,
fine.
and this is why, you know, mainstream media like you are losing the affections of the British public. Let's worry about where we are today. Let's worry about where the country's going.
Yes, that's why she's trying to hold the people who run the country to account, because of where the country is going.
Let's worry about the fact we're getting poorer.
One of your candidates already explained why we're getting poorer.
We're getting poor for a variety of reasons, of which Brexit is one.
Let's worry about the fact that our communities are breaking down.
You incited riots across the country this summer where citizens were literally hunting each other. And you're talking about blaming other people for communities breaking down.
That people are scared to walk on the streets of London wearing
That
a
wasn't
watch.
You're saying we need to talk about how people are scared to walk the streets at night while defending an MP who beat up a woman outside of a nightclub. Are you sure you're okay?
We're talking about an inside Westminster story that you want to talk about.
And that's his narrative, that everybody else in Westminster is out of touch with the real world. And yes, that's true about a lot of people in Westminster, but he is one of the people that is making the real world worse.
And if it was another political party and this has happened, you would expect me to ask them as well.
I have not heard you ask a single Labour minister about the case where a man was on the ground in Runcorn a few weeks ago and punched 5 times on the ground.
Has he not been suspended for that?
Suspended.
I thought he had the whip suspended.
Still a member of Parliament.
But that's not on Labour, though. Labour doesn't have the ability to fire him from Parliament, so it would make no sense to question a Labour minister about that, because he's no longer a Labour MP because of what he's done. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is actively supporting a known criminal being a member of Parliament. This man is tripping over his own BS.
Still a member of Parliament.
But he has had the whip suspended and they are investigating it.
We'll see.
Whereas what you're saying here is that the court documents are irrelevant, so...
I'm saying a spent conviction is irrelevant. You're quite right.
It is the sheer audacity to sit there as a man and tell 35 million women across the country that it is irrelevant whether the people who run the country have a history of violence against women. Truly incredible. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.